Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for being here for our session on the science of reading in the 21st century classroom. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm thrilled that you all made time to come join us. We've got a great panel of experts. I won't give you their long bios because they're all in the app, so you can feel free to go deeper. So why don't I quickly tell you who folks are? We're going to set the stage a little bit about why this matters, and then these folks are going to share their expertise with you, and we'll try to keep it snappy so you leave well informed. All right, so to my left, Adeola Whitney, who is the CEO of Reading Partners. Next to her is Melissa Gude, who's the Chief Academic Officer in Little Rock School District. We have a real live teacher on the stage, educator on the stage. This is really important. Thank you. Next to her is Mark Angel, who's the CEO and co-founder of Amira Learning. And then next to him is Liz Brooke, Dr. Liz Brooke, who is the Chief Learning Officer of Lexia Learning. And then bringing up the right side, depending on where you're sitting, is Jess Sliwerski, who is the co-founder and CEO of Ignite Reading. So if you're here, you probably know about the science of reading, but I just wanted to set some facts out to help ground us in what's going on around the country. So we know, according to some recent studies, only about 35% of US fourth graders are considered on grade level in reading. So you think about that, we know 65% of kids are not, 65% of fourth graders are not on grade level. We know that 9 out of 10 high school dropouts struggle to read. And we also know that about 70% of the US prison population reads at about a fourth grade level. So the way I think about that, the quickest way to disenfranchise people in this country is to make sure they're not very good at reading. And unfortunately, you couple this with that far too many schools and districts have been using a not great approach, a not research-based approach in balanced literacy or whole language. It's one of the stickiest bad practices we have in education that's slowly changing. We've got now, I think it's about 44 states who have some sort of policy on the books to either ban that practice, incent the correct practice, but of course we know there's a world of things that need to happen from a state policy to changing practice. Here we are, Tuesday at 11. Think about a classroom Tuesday at 11 to make something look different for students and their teachers. So today we're gonna talk about that, like what does that require from us? So we're gonna start with Melissa as our educator on the stage. As a district leader, you see the impact of science of reading all the time. You're in the middle of an exciting pilot with Ignite, which we'll talk about. But can you tell us a little bit about what educators need as districts make this shift?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thanks for level setting. And I am definitely not the one up here to give you all the answers around tech innovation. We definitely are exploring all of that. But I do feel very passionately about all students having the right to read, and in my role in ensuring that happens for kids in Little Rock, and as well as other places where I've worked. So I hope to share some things, some problems that we're thinking about at the district level and things that we're trying to solve for as a way to set the stage for additional conversation and comments from my colleagues. So I'm gonna start with the most obvious thing, and that's training, right? So when folks adopted the science of reading approach, in most cases, what people often don't realize is it required us to retrain our entire staff. And it's more difficult to retrain people than just to start from the ground, right? So Anne said, you know, there were deeply held beliefs about how we should teach reading that we had to unravel and then sort of build back up. And so in the state of Arkansas, this year, actually, well, it's been going on for several years, but we're finally at the place where teachers have to prove that they have engaged in a pathway around learning the science of reading, and their certification is attached to it. So there's real teeth in the need for that to happen. I would also then say 50% of our novice teachers are coming from other fields. Right? So this idea that we have to train around the science of reading is going nowhere and has to be a continued strategy for professional learning in our district, and I'm sure most others across the country. The second thing I'll bring up is high quality materials, right? It's been a talking point. It's been something we've been, saying is needed for a number of years. In Little Rock, we have that ecosystem developed. We have high quality materials that will engage kids in foundational skills. And when we talk about the science of reading, we're not just talking about foundational skills, but we're also talking about the comprehension, writing, and knowledge building that students need. And so those materials are critical, and the professional learning tied to those materials is also critical, right? Like professional learning around the science of reading and professional learning around how to best implement those materials is key. The third thing that I'll talk about are the structures, right? So when we think about the day, we have to have time built in to do all the things that I just said. In addition, we can't forget science and social studies. After high stakes testing was sort of driving folks' decision making around schedules, what you often saw in a lot of places where I've worked is the entire day was reading and math, right? And science and social studies is actually the place that, first of all, helps build, college and career readiness, but secondly, plays a key role in a child's ability to read, right? That is exactly where they're building the knowledge and vocabulary needed to be strong readers. So we have to look at our schedules and ensure that we have that built in. And the last thing I want to say that might not be the favorite thing for people to hear, but I think we have to stop talking about teachers being able to differentiate and do this all on their own. Right? So I think sitting in a tech space, in my mind, this is where we can innovate. We can think about ways to bring in tutors into classrooms, some of the work we're doing this year with Ignite Reading. We can also think about supplemental materials that open up access to the world for kids, and also support teachers in their ability to differentiate. So I'll stop there with those.
Great, thank you. For those of you who just came in, there are a few open seats. I used to teach 8th grade. I'm not afraid to be awkward in front of school, so come on up if you'd rather sit. All right, so Jess, let's turn this over to you then to tell us a little bit about your pilot with Little Rock. What have you learned? What are you seeing in your work with district teams?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I really appreciated hearing how Melissa talks about the intentional work that's happening in Little Rock, and really grateful to all of you for choosing this session and being here for this discussion, so thank you. The intentional shifts are where the work needs to begin, and those shifts, you can see it everywhere from policy that's happening around Right to Read Acts to then the ways that school systems are adopting high quality instructional materials, training teachers in the science of reading. And all of those things are really important, as well as intentional adoption and implementation of Tier 1 and Tier 2 programs. And for those of you who have gone down the science of reading rabbit hole in any way, you might also be familiar with Dr. Nancy Young's research. And if you were to Google Nancy Young Ladder of Reading, that presents yet another important layer that has to be explored and really intentionally and strategically thought about when we think about the science of reading and making sure that all of our babies learn to read. And what Nancy Young's ladder basically talks about is how our kids in our classrooms, they are coming in and they all have different brains. And some brains can learn to read relatively easily, and others need lots and lots and lots of practice and repetition if they are going to learn to crack the code and read with fluency, and thus be able to comprehend what they read, right? That's the end game. And when we consider the ladder in light of all of the other necessary intentional shifts, we also have to contend with the fact that we need a safety net in place, because there will still be kids that fall through the cracks, even in the most perfect literacy ecosystem. And for those of us who are educators, myself included, and many of our panelists, we know that there is never a perfect literacy ecosystem. So the work we've been doing with Little Rock has been in honor of all kids really truly learning to read and creating a foundational skills safety net that also recognizes that the act of learning to read is deeply human. And I might be an unpopular person at a tech conference that's all about AI this year. But the way that we're thinking about this work is having very highly trained humans who are teaching kids to read, precisely targeting their gaps. And then we're underpinning that with the tech to scale and the AI to ensure that these humans who show up and serve the precious kids in Little Rock and elsewhere are optimally developed and supported to make sure kids learn how to read. So it's been really such an honor to be shoulder to shoulder with Little Rock and part of their intentional literacy ecosystem.
Great, thank you. So Liz, then let's use that as a turn to Lexia and the work that you do. I think many in this room are probably familiar with Lexia's suite of tools, things like letters. There's many resources and products you all have designed. And we know that technology can help bring scale to this issue, and we always have a capacity gap in education. But what do you think we should keep in mind about how to do this well for both kids and teachers who are executing every day?
Yeah, thanks, Ann. And some of my comments are going to tag on to what Melissa and Jess were talking about. And it's funny, the question you asked, how do we use technology to scale, is the same question that Lexia's founder, Bob Lemire, asked 40 years ago. Lexia started in 1984 with a dad who had a son with dyslexia. And he said, it was on two principles, equity. How can I make sure that all students have access to this high quality instruction and high quality professionals that I could afford to send my son to? And he thought, even in 1984, how do we use technology? So again, he started with the problem, and I've heard this mentioned a few times, but it's worth repeating. We shouldn't start with, I want to use AI. We should start with, what problem are we trying to solve? And is AI the right tool to solve that, right? So we started 40 years ago this year. We're celebrating 40 years. We also started with an NICHD grant. So research is in our DNA, and I'm very proud to say I believe our library of research, peer-reviewed, published, randomized controlled trial gold standard, is one of the best in the K-12 market. So when you go to scale, it's very easy to lose sight of those two things, equity and efficacy. And I believe when you think about how do we keep the teachers at the center, and we started talking about 10 years ago about this formula. We take AI plus the HI, so getting at what you were saying, Jess and Melissa, the human intelligence. We're using the AI to empower the HI plus data is equitable instruction. And so I just challenge us all first to say, what problem are we trying to solve, or what opportunity are we going after? And is technology the right part of that? And then how do we keep the HI in the equation with the AI?
I feel like that's like a logo for something, right? I like that. Mark, I'm actually going to turn to you and then Adeola. But you've been thinking about that AI piece at Amira and had some really interesting, promising results. Can you tell us a little bit about Amira and what you're seeing?
Sure. So Amira was born at Carnegie Mellon in 1993. So it's now a 30-plus year R&D project from the folks who kind of invented AI. And they had the vision that given all of the challenges that you're hearing about, how do we scale for equity? How do we give students the day in and day out structured science of reading-based practice they need? They had the vision to say, we can create an intelligent reading assistant that can actually listen to students when they read out loud, use every single word read as a formative assessment to understand that student's reading brain, whether they're in the category where they need tons of help or whether they're able to move pretty quickly to the challenges of deeper comprehension, and then to deliver in the moment tutoring. So that's what Amira does today. Amira is an intelligent reading assistant for teachers, Every single day now, Amira tutors 2 million kids. So that's scale in action. And what we're seeing is that the most sophisticated adopters of science of reading, New York City Reads at the New York City DOE, Chicago Public Schools, Houston ISD, they look at the challenges of adoption that you've heard about, that you're experiencing, that you'll hear about over the next few minutes, and they understand that, in fact, in order for teachers to be their best, to do their best, they need a partner, and that partner has to be really, really smart and really, really well trained, and that's what Amira is about.
Great, thank you. Well, it sounds like, Mark, that's the AI plus the HI in action in most cases with kids.
That's exactly right. We talk about we need a 3-part harmony to make the science of reading work. It's a partnership between the teacher, the family, and the technology. And those 3 parts have to be in harmony and working together around the principles of science of reading to really fix those incredibly difficult statistics you talked about. But the good news is what we're seeing today in the research is that just 30 minutes a week with Amira produces about a 50% acceleration in growth. The state of Utah studied the outcomes across all their kids last year, and they saw that Amira produced about a 0.45 effect size. So it's a massive difference in terms of adding that uplift with the AI-driven practice.
Great. All right, Adeola, I'm so glad to bring you into this conversation because, of course, solving for this is not just what happens in the classroom, but what communities do to bring additional resources, support to bear. Reading Partners is one of the best in the country at doing that. Can you tell us a little bit about what you all do and what you're seeing in this technology-infused intervention for kids?
Yeah, first of all, hi everybody, and thank you to all of the other panelists. I mean, just listening to you and what the work that you all are up to is inspiring. And I think what this also just demonstrates is that not only does it take a village, right? And I say that as a Nigerian woman because that's where that comes from. But not only does it take a village, we're all part of an ecosystem. There's no silver bullet. There's not one solution that any of us represent that is the panacea. And I don't think any of us, I hope it's okay to speak for all of you, but I don't think any of us purport that our organizations or companies are the panacea to solving the literacy crisis. It takes all of us. There are millions of children in this country who are struggling to read, and the numbers Anne shared are simply those up to 4th grade. But then there are students in high school, and there are students who then become adults and have children and also struggle to read. So just had to say that. A few things. So we are a national nonprofit organization. We focus on literacy. We do that through tutoring. We believe that by mobilizing community volunteers, they can make a difference. If you think one person can make a difference in a child's life, volunteer with us 1 hour or 2 hours a week. So I'll say that. There's more information on our website, readingpartners.org. But what I want to talk about is so we've been around now for nearly 25 years, and our curriculum has been all paper-based for the majority of that time. We went into schools, we set up reading centers, we would mobilize and recruit volunteers and do that in partnership with AmeriCorps members who are the face of our program in schools. And that program worked. And similar to what Liz was saying, we also have randomized controlled trials that show that what we do is we make statistically significant difference in a child's life and we help them learn to read, right? So I know what we do works, but the pandemic upended all of that for us. Right? And I think as someone who's been working for a lot of national nonprofits focused solely on student learning and growth, I think one of the challenges we faced was like analysis paralysis. Organizations love talking about the problem, love analyzing the problem, love scheduling meetings to talk about the problem that they're trying to analyze, but actually solving it is hard, right? And we recognize, okay, we have to change what we're doing. It's not good enough to do what we were doing. First and foremost, during the pandemic, there weren't kids in schools. So how are we gonna work with them? So we created an online virtual model, and we're really excited about that. And the word that I heard a few times is thinking about scale. So we're a national nonprofit. We operate in 9 states across the country in over 15 school districts. But what we recognize is like we wanna be in even more places. And it's expensive to do that through direct service. And the best way that we could do that is actually partnering with other places where where young people also are. So they're not just in schools, but they're also in after-school programs. They're also at libraries. And how can we go to where kids are? How can we do work with communities, not to them or for them? And a big part of that is not coming in like we are simply the expert. We have some knowledge and resources, but communities are also enriched with great resources, and how can this be an exchange? And how can we use the curriculum that we have created for the last 25 years that's all backed in the science of reading, make that virtual, and support schools and young people and after-school programs in ways that matters most. And I think in the way that Mark talked about too, we're also at a place where we're piloting a number of different opportunities to do AI. So we'll continue the HI part of having tutors, having humans doing the tutoring, but doing things like decoding and helping children with phenomes. How can we embrace AI to support that work? So just
That's
really
great.
excited.
Great. Okay. I think I forgot to introduce myself. Isn't that so I'm Ann Wicks. I'm at the George W. Bush Institute. If you want to talk about politicization of policy, come find me afterwards. If anyone remembers reading first, we can have a whole sidebar. Anyway, we care a lot about what this looks like in policy. And one of the other things we obsess about, which might be a nerdy admission, is implementation. Because it's one thing to have an idea, it's so different to actually see it make a difference for kids. I know you all experience this in a big way. Like, what does it mean to change practice that impacts student outcomes? And I'll leave it open if anyone wants to offer a little bit. Melissa, I might voluntold you, but what does it really require of us, and all of us who want to work in and with schools, to think about implementation so we're not just blowing smoke, as my dad would say? And you can fill in the rest of the saying.
Great. So it's interesting, I've been around for the last day sort of listening to different folks talk, and I think the thing that kept coming into my head was, sitting in the seat of working in a central office at a district, it's really overwhelming, right? The resources, the tools, the solutions, right, that are out there. I don't even know how many emails I get, people reaching out saying, hey, we've got this solution for you. Hey, can we meet to talk about this? Hey, and at my core, I am an out-of-box thinker. I really like to think innovatively, and I also have kids minutes of the day in my heart and mind to say, how do we intentionally make decisions that are in my seat? How do I make decisions that are going to be the best use of kids' time? And it's really difficult to find, so I think to answer sort of the question, I think I just answered it with another question, but I think when I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for skin in the game and intentional. We've signed contracts with people, and that's the last we see, right? We have the thing isn't working the way we want it to work, and there's really, there's loops and holes to try to get someone on the line, and so we're way more selective about our partnerships, and I think sitting in this seat, I hope sometime we have a way to sort of vet resources that are out there. We have, organizations that vet materials, we have organizations that vet assessments, sort of. I hope that we can get to the place now where we can also have support for vetting the right tool to support, the need that we have. So I don't know if that answers it, but I do think it can be overwhelming in this seat.
Do you think your state agency could help with that? Does that help or not help? And if you don't want to answer that because this is being recorded,
I feel like I'm
totally
set up.
fair. And I'll ask you over a drink later.
Yeah. We'll move
Okay,
forward.
sidebar. Okay. All right, Mark, it looked like you wanted to.
Yeah, we see the implementation problem kind of from the other point of view. Amira's going to help kids if and only if students are actually on the software and engaged. And so what we see is that the foundational challenge is this really incredible tension between coherence, right? The science of reading demands coherence. We know that we have to do certain things in certain ways, and we have to enforce best practices. But on the other side of that is choice, right? If we don't allow the people who actually are in the classrooms and in the buildings to feel that they have agency and to feel bought in, then coherence runs up against the hard rock of resistance, right? So for us, a lot of getting implementation right is understanding that you can't swing the pendulum too far in the direction of either coherence or choice. You have to find this magical balance where leaders are setting the direction, ensuring that the district is all going in the right way, but where the people in the classrooms and at the building level feel empowered and can operate with enough latitude and enough belief that they actually put that coherence to work for real.
Liz.
Yeah, and I guess a couple of things. When you think about implementation, there's a quote by Richard Elmore out of Harvard that improvement is a process, not an event. And I think, especially in our schools, we adopt new things and we expect amazing results within 6 months or a year, and then we say, oh, it didn't work, let's go on to the next thing. So I think the first guidance would be thinking about what is realistic change in what period of time, and the systemic change, right, school change, all of that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there is a whole body of evidence. We talk about the science of reading, but there's something called implementation science. It's not as old as the science of reading, but it's been around about 10 to 15 years. If you're interested in learning more, the University of Washington has some great resources, as well as NERN, the National Implementation Research Network out of UNC Chapel Hill. And so what that does is it tries to systematically study what are the practices that are going to allow choice or are going to allow that adoption. So looking at not only what we're implementing, but how we're implementing it. So to make sure that all of us that are working with schools and partnering with schools, Melissa, I agree, we have year-long partnerships. It's not, one and done. It's a year-long partnership, progress monitoring, not only the use of the tool and the data, but the partnership in your needs as those change. But there is a whole body of evidence that talks about what works when we're trying to implement at scale. So I would just encourage people to look into the implementation science as well as the science of reading.
Great. I will say we did a report at the Bush Institute called Conditions for Change that literally studied if we support district teams on how to get better at implementation, do they have better results on the actual intervention? Shocker, they did. So if you're interested in looking, it's written for a district perspective. It's pretty pragmatic. Feel free to check it out. Jess, what did you want to offer?
Yeah. So implementation is where the rubber hits the road. And as lovely as it is that we have all of this policy swirling up here and we have curriculum adoptions happening here, at the end of the day, classroom teachers are going to go into their rooms and they're going to shut their doors and they're going to do what they need to do to teach their babies. And that may or may not be what is best practice based on shifts that are happening, because there's also this very real thing around changing hearts and minds and galvanizing folks to do this and to do it really well. And I think a lot about urgency. And yes, we're training teachers, and that can be a slow burn. And in the meantime, kids need to learn to read. You're in first grade, hopefully only once, and by the end of first grade, you need to know how to decode and read with fluency so that you start second grade, you are building knowledge, and you have every opportunity in school and life available to you. Period, full stop. This is what the promise of public education should be, right? And so when we think about what it means to partner with folks, Little Rock as an example, we have the privilege to work with them. And because they are procuring our services, we have the responsibility to get results and get results fast. And so we think about how critical it is to sweat the small stuff from the district level all the way down to each precious child that we are teaching to read. And so there's a level of, in the way that we approach implementation, authoritative empathy, largely rooted in lived experience. I myself was a first grade teacher, a school leader, a system leader. So understanding all of these stakeholders' needs and the realities, the constraints, the opportunities within the system, and how to then design such that your implementation is really honoring those needs. And that then shows up in the way that we partner shoulder to shoulder to figure out how do we all do this, right? Adeola talked about it takes a village, and it really does. And every one of us has a part to play if we are going to ensure kids learn to read, because this is a highly solvable crisis. But our kids can't wait. They can't wait for us as adults to figure our shit out. They need to learn to read yesterday, today, right now. And, you know, the role of partners is to take the burden off of Melissa, the chief academic officer, or the school leader, or even the teacher who can't do it all by themselves, and make sure that we get the job done for our kids.
Great. Liz and then Adeola, I wonder if you could both, I didn't tell you I was going to ask this, but it's your AI HI has really got me thinking. And I'm wondering if you can, how do we know when we have the balance right? What does it look like when it's right, and what does it look like when it's wrong? And Liz, I wonder if you'd do it, and then Adeola, I know since you've adopted that, I just would love to know what you've learned, what you think about that.
Sure. So in one of the US reports around AI, they talked about the electric bike analogy versus the Roomba, right? In the electric bike, the human is still in control, but it's giving you that extra boost, right? Where the Roomba is off, no human needed, right? So I think about the right balance as the electric bike and not the Roomba. And we're trying to collect data in the background. Assessment without testing is our patented embedded assessment. And so what we're trying to do is give the results, to Jess's point, when you're in the classroom. And I was a first grade teacher who actually didn't know how to teach reading. That doesn't make my official bio, but I was trained in whole language. And so it's very personal to me to make sure we give teachers the data that they need to do the differentiation and the personalization, but also to allow the students to continue to practice if they need 30 repetitions or 60 repetitions. So I think of it as that electric bike and trying to empower that human intelligence with all these advancements of the AI. So that's how I think about that. The correct balance is that electric bike and not the Roomba.
Yes, the Roomba can terrorize your pets and fall off a cliff. We all know that. That's a really, okay, like you can tell I like simple things that help me remember complex concepts. I will be remembering this. So Adeola, do you want to say a little bit about what you've learned about that balance as you all have implemented more AI solutions and reading partners with a really broad network of volunteers who have, are like well-meaning, educated lay people, not trained educators. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm gonna remix the question just a little bit.
Please.
That's okay, Ann. Okay, because I was thinking about what was shared around implementation. So I have some thoughts about implementation. So I'm thinking implementation and AI, HI, the Roomba, all the things. First and foremost, I'll just say that I think with every great solution, technologically based solution, AI, human-centered, HI. It's new for me. I keep trying to get to HI, but human intelligence solution. All of the solutions that exist. I think a few things are true, and I think first and foremost, when teaching kids how to read, we can't solely focus on the academic implications of literacy. Like, yes, that is so important, and so is a whole child, and so is social and emotional learning. And so we're not currently piloting things in AI around social and emotional learning. I think that's where the human connection is so important. I was talking to my chief financial and operating officer this morning. She's on the East Coast. And we were talking about the budget. And right before that conversation, she had just come out of tutoring a student. My entire executive team tutors at least once a week for an hour. So her name is Rosa. Rosa had just finished tutoring a student. And she talked about for the first 10 minutes how much that little girl was crying. She was crying, she was crying, she was crying. Rosa didn't do anything. She came into the session, it was a virtual session. She came into the session crying. And so we were talking about what she did to ultimately get the girl to read. And the girl ended up reading, and she ended up, sounding out letters and words and everything with her, and she completed the session successfully. But I think in the challenge, and I think this is the same thing as the Roomba, if it was simply technology that was put in front of a student and there wasn't anything that had anything to do with a human, that young person is crying, and what you gonna do? So I mean, I think that is the piece that's extraordinarily important. So social and emotional learning is embedded into all of our curriculum, whether it's our virtual curriculum or our in-person paper-based curriculum. That is so key, and I think especially over the last 4 years when young people were forced to be in front of a screen all the time, and the lead teachers and educators were also forced to be in front of screens, and that's not what anybody wanted, and I think it just made things so challenging. How can we find that balance? So I think that's something that we're constantly thinking about at Reading Partners. Additionally, we use both paper-based books, but we also use ebooks to help kids learn to read. And one of the things, 90% of the kids that we serve at Reading Partners are Black and brown. And it's extraordinarily important, especially with decodable text for young children that are learning to decode. A lot of the books that they're reading have inanimate objects in them. It's not humans. And when they are humans, the majority of those humans do not look like the babies that we serve. So we have created a series of books called Cover to Cover to specifically, so that our young people can see themselves in books. So that's extraordinarily important. We just think a lot about how we embrace race, equity, diversity, and inclusion into all of the work that we do. I think there's still a lot of questions about what does that look like in AI. I don't have the answer to that. I mean, we are at the early stages of piloting many things, and I don't think we are at Reading Partners, we're not the ones creating that AI. We want to partner with so many companies who have devoted so much time to that work. So that's just been how we approach that work. But what we've done for the last 25 years and the transformation that can happen with the young student and the relationship building that happens with the tutor and student, that is never going away, that we will continue to do that. And we want to embrace AI to really just move the needle faster and to also scale our ability to serve more and more kids.
Great, thank you. Okay, guys, you can see we just have a few minutes left, so I'm gonna ask you each to do 2 things for the group. One, if folks want to learn more about this, offer something they can read, watch, listen to that you'd recommend. And the second, I'd love for you just to quickly say what's giving you hope right now about this. We'll end on an optimistic note. And Jess, I'm looking at you. Can I start with you? Okay.
Well, what's giving me hope is I actually thought there would be no one in this session because you all would be chilling in the hallways, and the fact that so many people came to be part of this conversation gives me hope around all of the shifts that need to keep happening to make sure kids learn how to read. So thank you. And my recommendation, I'm sure everyone's listened to Sold a Story. If you haven't, listen to it, but my recommendation is there is a documentary film called Hopeville. Look it up. Find a way to see it. If you're a systems leader, find a way to bring it to your school district because it so beautifully and concretely lays out what it takes to ensure that kids learn to read in 1st grade and can be a really powerful catalyst for important work that you're trying to galvanize.
Great. Liz?
Yes, it is a great documentary of district level work happening in the real world, so to speak. So what gives me hope is also that the dialogue that is happening, and again, coming from someone who experienced that feeling of shame and remorse of I was teaching the wrong way, right? I'll give you 2 resources. There's a great blog by Margaret Goldberg called Teachers Won't Embrace Research Until Research Embraces Them. And it talks about how they feel in the balanced literacy whole language world and how they feel when they're being told you've been teaching the wrong way for 20 years. So, but I'm hopeful because, you know, when we know better, we do better, and we're moving those conversations forward. The second resource that I would highly recommend is the Reading League Compass. If you Google the Reading League Compass, it's a compass through this science of reading journey from a policymaker standpoint, a parent standpoint, an educator, a district level. And sorry, one last one. My former colleagues at the Florida Center for Reading Research just released the Academy, so fcrr.org/academy, all free resources developed by the best researchers in the world, and free access to all. So that would be my recommendation.
Mark?
Yeah, I'll start with the resource. Often we hear the science of reading equated kind of reductionistly to phonics or greater emphasis on phonemic awareness. And the resource that I really believe in is a published article by Dr. Nell Duke, and she talks about the science of reading progresses through her work in the active framework, and she documents 18 things that have been proven in the research to really make a difference. And so that holistic view is there. And what really gives me hope is that we're having these dialogues and conversations that are keyed to the science and the data, and we're really starting now to look at evidence-based practices.
Awesome. What gives me hope is we're at a place where we're admitting that maybe what we were doing wasn't best practice. As educators, that's hard. You are often seen as the one that knows it all. And so I think we have to be able to say, like, hey, we didn't get it right, and now we're going to do better. And then I think the resource, they kept knocking off some of mine. So I will just throw out, too, if you haven't seen the Right to Read film, go see it.
You're at a disadvantage being last. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No disadvantage. It's okay. What gives me hope, all of you, the fact that states, the New York Times, I mean, everybody is talking about either putting money towards this literacy challenge that we're seeing, and people are talking about it who are not even in education, and I think that is a really good sign, and that means a lot. So that's what gives me hope. I think I love Apple Podcasts. There are a lot of great podcasts, including the one that was just mentioned, as well as Why So Many American Kids Struggle to Read and How to Fix That is great, I think, for anybody, whether you're an educator or not an educator. I think it's just a great resource.
Yeah. And if you're a Sold a Story fan, the 2 new episodes just dropped that talk about the aftermath. Yep. It is fascinating and demoralizing when anyway, I will say less. But listen, all right, we've gone 2 minutes and 19 seconds over. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here. Please join me in thanking our panelists.